Hello, my name's Natalie, and today I'm going to be talking about mutual aid and how one of my favourite films, I, Daniel Blake, shows us an example of what mutual aid can look like. I've recently learnt about the concept mutual aid, and I'm really excited by it. In my research, I found that mutual aid dates back to around the 1700s in America, as of course Black and migrant communities supported each other. I'm definitely conscious of jumping on the bandwagon here, and I don't want to whitewash the concept, so do forgive me if I get some things wrong. I certainly find that this concept is nothing new when I compare it to my limited knowledge of Tikanga Māori, who are the Indigenous people of New Zealand, where I'm from. Concepts that they have in their culture have been around for generations. These concepts include things like manakitanga, which is around hospitality, kindness, generosity, and support. Tautoko, which is supportive action, and kotahitanga, which is unity. Again, forgive me if I've got these concepts wrong, but that's my understanding. I may not have the context completely right here, but my understanding is that Māori people and culture, and in my experience, have always been about hospitality, kindness, supporting each other, sharing resources, learning from each other, and caring for all people. BIPOC peoples have always committed to mutual aid in their communities, and it's now becoming a mainstream concept. Mutual aid is not just an exercise in solidarity, but it's also political action. I found a piece written by Florence O'Taylor, and I'll link it below, that I found really challenging. Her piece is in the context of religion and Christianity, but you can leave that part to the side and read the rest. She writes, "For those historically involved with mutual aid groups, normal has looked like oppression, poverty, affliction, and even death. Rather, they have long existed to resist such oppressive forces, to create supportive communities that foster transformative politics." So here she's talking about how mutual aid, now this mainstream concept, has always existed for people who have suffered and been oppressed, and that it's always been about political action and change. She goes on, "The reality we are facing is a result of political agendas that have perpetuated systems of racial, social, and economic injustice. We need to resist grassroots movements being co-opted to support the political agenda of the status quo, hoping to satisfy our desire for justice without requiring real change. Might we resist a return to normal and use our privilege to amplify demands for action on structural racism and neoliberal agendas propagating oppression in our society?" So again here she's just reinforcing this idea that mutual aid is being whitewashed or co-opted by people in power, and that we need to make sure that that doesn't happen, or that the grassroots movements that have already been happening for generations probably don't get pushed aside in favour of these newer, more shiny versions of mutual aid. I know I need to be conscious and careful of not falling into the trap of wanting to help and instead disempowering people in the communities who have already been doing this work, particularly those in BIPOC communities. The pandemic has certainly increased the visibility of this concept of mutual aid, and it has started to be colonised by white mainstream leaders and people in power. I know personally in New Zealand, where I spent most of the initial outbreak in 2020, we were encouraged by the government to check on our neighbours, create communities, exchange phone numbers with people so that we could support one another. The behaviour wasn't labelled as mutual aid, but it was politically motivated care. I do believe that this came from a good place, however, it delegates the responsibility of care to us rather than the state. Many neighbours set up communication lines and did take care of each other during the pandemic, which is awesome to see. And some of those communities have continued to flourish into more official mutual aid networks, whereas others have just died down as a result of the pandemic sort of easing off a bit. I think mutual aid as an idea or as a movement is super important and life-changing. I don't think we can make any forward progress without it. Communities and people need to come together and support one another, especially when we're trying to fight systemic oppression. One of my favourite films is a shocking example of the kind of systemic oppression that keeps people down. It shows how political and bureaucratic systems keep people suffering. And it's called I, Daniel Blake. I will discuss some minor plot points ahead, but I won't spoil the film too much, so please go and watch it if you haven't already. I, Daniel Blake is a British film about an older man who suffers from a heart attack and can no longer do his carpentry job. It paints the picture of an extremely bureaucratic system where people are treated like numbers, where people like Blake have no chance of survival in a welfare system that is supposed to be a safety net for people in difficult circumstances. He strikes up a friendship with Katie, who has moved away from London, away from her support networks, with her 2 young children in order to escape the high cost of living. The film follows their hardships as they become good friends and try and overcome their struggles. The beauty of this film is the way in which Daniel and Katie help each other even though they both have basically nothing to give. The horror of this film is the constant, degrading, impossible hoops that they have to jump through in order to get any kind of support from the welfare system. It reminds me of the concept of mutual aid, although this film isn't exactly about mutual aid, because it's about 2 unlikely friends who come together, who see each other's needs and truly support and care for each other. Both Daniel and Katie provide friendship and emotional support to each other. They help each other with labour, with tasks. They share food, they provide care, they give each other gifts. And they're overall vulnerable with each other. They share their most darkest and horrible pains. This film is also political, calling out the systemic inequalities that cause people like Daniel and Katie to be in these sorts of positions. Blake is declared unfit for work by his doctor as a result of his heart attack, rightly so, yet the Department of Work and Pensions in the UK assigns him a healthcare professional to review his case, and this healthcare professional deems him fit for work. Poor Daniel Blake has to go 35 hours a week looking for jobs to prove that he has looked for work so that he can get the unemployment benefit. He's supposed to be resting, he's supposed to be recovering from a near-death experience, and yet the system makes it so that he is unable to do that. There are instances where Blake and Katie seem to be banging their heads against a brick wall, desperately trying to be seen as human and in need of help, yet they are given robotic, scripted answers from the people who have some power. The film calls out the stupidity of these responses and demands that people be seen. Blake hits rock bottom. It motivates him to protest, it motivates him to take action, it motivates him to make a political statement. And that's what happens. When capitalist and patriarchal forces conspire against people and create systems of oppression, people have no choice but to band together, look out for each other, and also to fight back when they can. What have they got to lose? There are probably other films out there with better links to the concept of mutual aid. And if you've seen them and can recommend them, please leave a comment below so I can go and watch it too. I will share a couple of links below about mutual aid that I found interesting and helpful in my research, and I'll see you next time. Bye.